What are we working on today?
Actually, the Great Oz, who does all the filming, had a really good question.
What's the question?
I don't know. I'll go get him.
Oh, sorry.
She's kind of rough sometimes.
So as we're going through your combat blueprint, as a beginner, I was asking, where do we begin?
We are at the Eastern Academy of Mixed Martial Arts in Virginia Beach, and we're going to be taking a look at a video series on the combat blueprint and how I use it to build training curriculum. Overall for the combat blueprint is to avoid becoming systemized. What do I mean by being systemized? Sometimes if you study a combative art or a martial art, you can have the belief systems ingrained into you without even realizing it. And they're not always true. So we want to avoid having that information ingrained just mindlessly into our nervous system, into our minds, until we've had a chance to break it down, study it based on us individually, and determine if it's something that's actually going to be useful to us. So the combat blueprint is broken down into primal environments. Now, what a primal environment is what will happen between two human machines in a fight, in combat, whether you're trained or untrained. An example of this is punching, the striking range. You don't have to have training to know how to punch somebody. You can just figure it out. And you can see videos of this in fights on YouTube all the time. People, they'll get in a fight, obviously they've never had any training, and they just figure out what they can do and throw it. Now, it's not always good looking. Obviously, the better you are, the better trained you are, the better you're going to be. But the point is, you don't have to have that training. That's what makes it a primal environment. Another example of this is edged weaponry or blunt weaponry. I will see videos from some of the clients that I work with of law enforcement officers who maybe will have someone in a processing room, or they're having to deal with someone, they're having a communication with them. And they'll grab something, any tool, like a pen or a pencil, and try to use that. Chances are they didn't go through a knife fighting class to learn how to do that. It's just primal. It's human instinct. Now, obviously, like I said earlier, if you're trained, you're going to be better at it. And so a lot of these primal environments were chosen based on that. Now, obviously, there are some things that you can learn in combative arts that you have to have training in order for it to work. You don't see it happening in a combative exchange unless they are trained. So we leave those out in the beginning to save time and to be able to focus our energy. So what are those primal environments in the combat blueprint? The first one for me is firearms. Number 2 is going to be edged or blunt weaponry. Number 3 is going to be striking with the body, the human machine. Number 4 is going to be the hand fighting, pummeling, or giraffe wrestling environment. It's pretty much standing grappling. And then number 5 is going to be anything on the ground fighting, grappling, and there are multiple areas of study on the ground. Now, each one of these environments can be broken up into different areas. Like we said, each one is a primal environment. One of the reasons we want this outline is to help point out our gaps in knowledge. Some systems may not teach anything in edged weaponry. Some systems may not teach much at all in the grappling or the ground fighting environment. So you can use the outline to take a look at what you're doing and what you're training and determine if you're lacking something. And if you are, you can go and try to find a source of information in order to fill that gap and to make sure that you have good, high quality, high percentage information in each of the primal environments. Earlier I mentioned finding high percentage technique or information in each of these primal environments. What I mean by that is finding information that has a high percentage of success. Now, you may find some techniques that will fit into one of these categories, but they only work in one scenario. It may be a technique that's specifically designed for a certain type of hold. Well, I may not want to spend a tremendous amount of time on that information in the beginning. I want to find out what are the blocks of information that are highly effective. In other words, they work most of the time, most often for me. Now, example of this is in the striking environment. It's just an old school jab cross. You will see a jab cross in multiple different systems, and one of the reasons is because it's a high percentage technique. It's very effective. Done at the right time, I give this example often in mixed martial arts. A good solid cross done at the right time wins a fight. So that would be an example of a high percentage technique. And we want to find this type of information in each of these environments. And one of the reasons is because limited time. I only have so much time that I can devote to my training, depending on your schedule. So, and I know that I have to find information for each of these environments in order to have a good, complete combative outline or system. So based on that, I know that I'm going to have limited energy to put into it. So I want to determine the best possible way I can spend my time developing those skill sets and knowledge. Hey, Jen, what environment are we looking at first?
Striking.
Of course, striking. All right, so if we're looking at the striking primal environment, we want to have a good educational process to choose the information. We could just take a martial art and just believe exactly what that art tells us is the best. For me, I like to have a little more of an intelligent approach of what I need first, and then I will go and find information from different martial arts. I call this principle system as a source. So if we're taking a look at striking, one of the first things we got to study in this section is the human body. What weapons are available to me in empty hand striking? I will commonly say all systems are designed by man, for man. Therefore, man is ultimately the answer and not the martial art. The human machine is the answer. So taking that into consideration, what are our weapon systems? Obviously, the hands, the elbows, shoulders are going to be tools that we can use. The headbutts are options. The lower body, knee strikes, kicking strikes, stomping. I like to reference a principle called the chaining principle just to keep a mental visual around this. I can chain weapon systems in each extremity. So that's the first thing, is the study of those tools and what is available to me. And I want to get an understanding of, for instance, the hand, how can it form different weapons? Now, the basic one is just the old school, ball up your fist. But what are the multiple dimensions of a fist? How many different ways can I use that tool? And I would take the time to study this potentially on like a focus mitt with a partner or something, or a heavy bag, some sort of training apparatus, or a body, which is another principle we follow, is using the body as a pad. Okay, so the next thought tool we want to take into consideration under the column of striking is, what is our goal? Why are we studying this environment? Well, one of the first ones is to understand how to develop ballistic force, ballistic destructive power, and deliver it to someone else or another target or multiple other targets. And there's different ways you can train this, and one of the most common is, like we're in a martial arts academy today, open space. Just standing in the academy floor and learning mechanically my relation to my contact with the earth and how I can use that relation and transfer energy from the earth through the skeletal system or a properly aligned body in order to deliver ballistic force, destructive force. So that's the first thing we want to take a look at, is the study of developing power. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples of these different ideas. Borrow you?
Sure.
All right, so I'm a big fan of Christmas too, but you're gonna have to lose the shirt. Okay, so the first thing we're taking a look at is just the development of mechanics and power. And what we'll take a look at is the jab cross. We'll start off with just a cross because it's a very common technique in combative arts. So what we want to do is learn how to manipulate the skeletal system in order to base power on skeletal alignment, structure. Now, being strong is not a bad thing, but you can add that to good skeletal alignment. And the understanding of alignment is a timeless tool. It's something that even as you get a little longer in your journey, you're still going to be able to be good at it. So what we're going to do is take a look at how the heel is up. You're going to see Jen rotate. We nickname this squashing the bug. Twisting the back knee in. She's got most of her weight in this front foot, and that creates a pivotal energy in the body, and she's going to throw that backhand. Good. So, another area to take a look at would be position. When she throws the punch, when she pulls the punch back, where does it go? Does it drop? Does it leave the jaw open? I might pay attention to this hand too. And is it in position? So she throws. Does it drop? So I would say, place it according to what you're training. Different systems will place the backhand in different positions. It depends on what works for you. Sink a little. There you go. Turn over a little more. That's it. The next thing we want to be able to achieve in our training is developing tempo, timing in relation to our tools. Sometimes I get very good timing with fist, but then when I start to maybe change range and use a different weapon system like an elbow or shoulder, I start to lose that rhythm. They don't connect well. In other words, I'm not playing my instrument well. So I want to have the ability to start developing timing in my movement between different weapon systems. Now this commonly will happen because of a change in range. Either I choose to change range by getting closer to the threat, or the threat is getting closer to me. If I'm just good at one, for instance, striking, and the threat gets close to me and I still try to use that tool at a close range, it just doesn't work as well. This is one of the reasons we want to study the multiple or the different capacities of the human machine as far as striking. Go jab, cross, hook. 1, 2, 3, elbow, elbow. And you'll have to change the range.
Okay.
So here we go. 1, 2, 3. That's it.
And back up.
That's it.
Okay.
So the next one I mentioned earlier is the study of range. I separate this from the other things that we want to accomplish because of its importance. I want to be able to learn how to use these tools in relation to the distance I am, and not just standing. We're actually going to see this a little farther into the video. There may be other body positions that I end up in. I don't always just get to stand in open space. So I have to take the time to study the relation to those ranges between me and the threat or the target in order to operate intelligently and to be able to deliver that ballistic force at all of those ranges. Jab, cross, hook. 1, 2, 3, elbow, elbow.
How are you headbutting? What is the mechanics behind what you're doing right now?
The Great Oz speaks. Different systems will do them in different ways. I use the ridges of the skull or the top of the skull. So for instance, if Jen's coming in, she's entering with that long range tool, going to a mid-range tool, she's trapping and she's using the top part of the head. So up top. You don't have to have a lot of power with headbutts. Actually, it's just timing and placement. You put them in the right place. They have a tremendous effect. Another option we could have her train is to turn her head one way or the other and use the ridge. So enter the same way. She trap. And so she turns and uses the side of the head like that. Same thing. 1, 2, 3. Elbow, elbow, headbutt, knee. Throw the back one. Almost there.
Well, I was asking you, like, what attributes or kind of skills were you looking at in that drill specifically? Like, what was that helping build?
Well, we're mainly at this time looking at the timing and tempo between your tools, your ability to play your musical instrument or the notes in your music. Sometimes you'll be very good with your hands. Some students will feel awkward using elbows and headbutts. If you've never put headbutts into a combination like this, it could feel awkward. So we would want to place together intelligent combination or drills to help you develop that comfort using those tools at various ranges. And for me, these are just examples of your fundamentals. These are your major notes. You may also have like an intermediate idea, which could be the folding combinations. All right, so an example of a folding combination, I learned these from Burmese Bondo. And what you're doing is you're using a elbow, and I like a back fist. So it's being able to transfer between those two smoothly and with timing. You'll watch boxers on speed bags develop tempo and timing using their tools. This is the same type of drill. So you could do this on a bag. We commonly do it body as a pad on our partner's shoulders. So if my partner gives me a shoulder, you can show the series like that. And I'm going to use a combination of 3. This could just be like a palm strike. It could be a hook. It could be anything you want. 1, 2, 3. And again, I would want to know in training, it's a drill. How am I taking the same mechanics I learned from my fundamental jab cross and applying it into this? And I just want to be able to develop that tool on the shoulder, but you would apply it to either the partner's head, or it could go against an item that came up in the fight. You know, if I threw something and that was in the way, you could clear it with the same tool. So it could be a clearing weapon. It can come in on different angles. Those are folding combinations. And to me, this would be an intermediate level of that tempo training that we were discussing with the focus mitts. Cool. Hand comes up. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The next thing that we want to achieve in striking is training good position. Sometimes this is overlooked in this training, but it's super important, especially if you are planning on doing combative arts for any length of time. Good position is a timeless tool. What I mean by that is it will work for you when you're young and fast. It will also work for you as you get a little more age on you. What do I mean by good position? Like on a basic jab cross, it's pretty common to see when we're training, when I throw this punch, this hand will drop. So it's training the other parts of your body that you may not be concentrating on at that moment to be in a good position at the right time. 1, 2. Right.
So what are you looking for me to do?
I'm just going to show, I'm checking position. So,
You want?
yeah, and what I'm doing is checking that the hand's up. If it's down, you get popped.
Well, you're not aiming for my head.
Because I like you.
It's okay.
Okay, an example of position training. We've talked about skeletal alignment, good mechanics, tempo and timing. This would be in relation to where the hands are placed in action. Sometimes if they're not trained to be in the right place at the right time, someone could just be taking a wild shot and you have a bad day because of it. So an example of this, and we talked about this earlier, is if we did jab cross, when that cross comes out, she's placing the hand that isn't working into a position to protect herself. If it's tight when I throw it, it's in position. And we'll test this sometimes like this. Go jab cross. That's it. Again. 1, 2. Yeah. 1, 2. I'll check it. Or I'll check it mid-punch like that. 1, 2. And obviously if the hand is down, they might take a little tap. For beginning students, we can just tap them on the shoulder because it's just a reminder of where the hand is supposed to be. You can also throw a straight shot here. So if she goes jab cross and that elbow is too wide, a shot coming straight in, and you can tap the chest, but it could be a shot to the chin too. 1, 2. You see how she got it nice and tucked in there. 1, 2. That. So again, we're just training the non-operating tool to be in the right place at the right time. So the combat blueprint gives you a series of reference tools or mind tools to help you build a more intelligent educational process for your training. That way you're not just blindly following some martial art. Not that the martial arts aren't correct in what they do, but sometimes they may not fit us and we need to find additional information. An additional tool we use when we are referencing the combat blueprint, we call the around the world drill. This drill is actually borrowed from Kizi fighting method, but you will also see these training concepts in Filipino Kali. And what they're basically doing is once you have developed the ability to produce, say, destructive force or power in the most common position, which is standing, they will start to look or reference additional body positions and how do we produce power out of those positions. So this is the set that we use. Number 1 is obviously standing. Number 2 for us is just squatting. Now, this can happen in different positions. Sometimes you will see it in a T position when you're grappling and they're trying to lower their base. They're in a squatting position. A lot of traditional martial arts work out of this position. The next one is going to be a kneeling position, either a single knee or a double knee. The next one on the series is called a seated position. And you'll see that Jen isn't actually making contact with the mat here. She's slightly above it. We nickname this hovercraft. The reason for this is it's difficult to produce power in open space when you're seated. It's not that you can't, but most of it is just based on arm strength. So the next position is going to be a grounded position or a laying position. For us, it is always on the side. So if she were to switch sides here, you see she's going to raise her hips up and switch. She comes back. We nickname this the basic defensive posture. We don't really like to train a lot flat. It's not that we won't look at it occasionally, but on the ground and ground fighting, for us, the only time we'll be flat on the ground is if we're unconscious or dead. And then we're going to come up from there. So she comes up through the seated, through a kneeling position, squatting, and then standing. Just squat, jab cross, kneel, seated. Hips up a little higher. So this next thing we're going to take a look at is in relation to the around the world drill that we did earlier. We'll play that drill in open space like we showed, but you'll also start to introduce it to different environments. Some of the common ones that we'll train are vertical surfaces, walls, cars. or corners. And the next one would be like a seated position in a chair or in relation to a table. Nice. Okay, one of the other tools that we will use when we are building curriculum in this range is a principle we refer to as 360 degrees of destructive force. What that basically means is whatever you're doing, we want to ask ourselves, how would I deliver destructive force in other areas? And you can say, maybe I imagine that there's other opponents around me. So Jen was working a jab cross earlier, old school jab cross. So I would place something on her flank and I would say, how would you deliver some destructive force at this angle in consideration to the jab cross? So she's putting in a winging elbow. It could be a back elbow. And again, at this point, you choose what you like, what works for you and what you want to train. So again, jab cross. It may be like a cross, wing elbow, cross. Again. So another way I will train this with students is, and you have to be careful with this one depending on the student, is I'll just hold pads behind them like this. And as they're shadow boxing, I'm looking for energy in this specific tool. Okay, what if it were a low one? Okay. Same thing on the other side. Good. Right. So another example of that is if we had that jab cross, I would place it immediately behind her. The idea being someone standing close to you from behind. So you can turn and look at where your target is. Mm-hmm. How would you deliver force? And how would you mix it into those basics you've developed? Okay. So you'll go jab, swing it. Right. That's the idea. I'll move my face out of the way now.
Just to make sure I know what you're looking for here.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
That's it. Again. Nice again. Good. Okay, so then what we would do is start to combine these principles. Earlier, Jen showed us the around the world drill, and we took our jab cross and we plugged it into the drill. We would run through each position and work combinations, the basic ones that we choose, and develop power and timing and placement. And then the next thing we may do is put it in this box drill, the same positions. So instead of like earlier when she was in a grounded position, I stood over her, I may be kneeling next to her like a grappler or something. And I would say, how do you deliver destructive force in this range, in this direction? So that's one of the reasons for the mind tools is it forces us to create our own curriculum. And you'll find that using them will help you design quite a bit of training. That's it. Okay, do wing elbow, ram attack. Nice. That's it. Do wing elbow, cross, ram attack. Good. Okay, so this is another example of folding combinations. And you can, again, choose the type of elbows you want to plug in. So we say an elbow, hammer fist, elbow. And then, again, one of the first things we like to do is develop good timing and rhythm between the moves. That's it. Nice. So let's put a headbutt on the end of that.
In the end?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. So today we are taking a loose look at the combat blueprint, the striking range. Now, most of the stuff we did today was primarily upper body, using the tools of the upper body. Of course, you would go through the same process and develop all the tools that you would want to use with the lower body as well. Now, we looked at the mind tools that we use to develop our curriculum. So These tools help us choose intelligently and fill our gaps in knowledge. It'll point out what we don't know, and so we can go and look for information to fill those gaps in knowledge or gaps in training. So this is something you can do too. It doesn't necessarily have to be, or you don't have to choose the things that we choose. You do know that you want to be good at using an elbow, for instance, but how you use it can be up to you. And you can go and find that information in the various martial arts that are available out there. And it's going to vary. What works for you is not going to necessarily work for me or someone else. What you're looking for is your system. One of the first principles we took a look at was being unsystemized, not quote unquote being brainwashed by a martial art. We want to step outside of the martial arts long enough to find out what works for us, how we think, our experiences, how we're built. And then eventually you will start to put together an intelligent list of training and methodologies that fit you. In other words, you're designing your own system. Now at that point, I want to be systemized. I want to train it hundreds of times and start to ingrain that knowledge, skill, and information into your nervous system.
What would you say to somebody who's just getting into martial arts and who wants to start looking in their local community for sources of information?
Well, for me, I start with the combat blueprint and say you're looking at the striking section. One of the first places I will usually send people is like Muay Thai boxing, Burmese boxing, Lithuanian boxing. One of the reasons is because of the availability. It's relatively easy to find now. And Muay Thai is one of the most powerful striking arts on the planet. It's fantastic. So that alone is going to give you some great information. But you also want to look at, are you using the full tool, all the tools of the body? And I mentioned Burmese Bondo. One of the things that separates Burmese Bondo from Muay Thai is that they started to plug in the headbutts more, and they would mix it into their combinations. You see this also in Cambodian boxing. So, if you notice that one of the tools that is on your list is not being trained, you may have to go and look for another option. And that involves doing a little research. And it might involve doing a little travel. Because sometimes those sources of information might not be down the street at the local martial arts school. So again, that kind of comes back to how determined you are to build your system, put together your intelligent training process. If you are determined to look for it, you're going to travel. And if you're willing to travel, you can find some pretty amazing sources of information out there. But to answer your question, that's what I would probably look for first is a good Thai boxing school, good Burmese boxing school, good boxing school. So that's taking a look or a semi-deep dive into the striking range of the combat blueprint. One thing that we didn't take into consideration, because we're trying to look at this broadly, is once we start to develop our system and what we're going to do, is how do our local laws affect this? How does the society we live in going to affect how we implement this? Because it will have to change. What you may do inside of an academy could be considered assault on the street. And we have to take that into consideration. We have to know that. And you really should be training those concepts and ideas in here with your partners so that that becomes, or your reactions, how you hold yourself, how you use the gift of gab becomes part of your nervous reaction in those stressful situations. Now, additionally, and I've talked about this in several other videos, if you carry a firearm or a straight blade, which I do on a regular basis, how does that affect all of this? And we've done several other videos on this too. Once you put on your training kit, we have a training gun and a training knife that we will wear regularly in all of this training. It changes a lot of stuff because one, you have to protect it. And two, you have to keep it from falling out, going across the floor. And those things change a lot of the mechanics we took a look at today. So if for instance, you regularly do carry outside the academy, get a training kit and start putting it on. And you will apply that in every range of the combat blueprint. It will change a lot of your fundamentals and your curriculum. All right, guys, we are at the Eastern Academy of Mixed Martial Arts, and we're here today with Sifu Wasay. I wanted to introduce him to you. And we're talking about the combat blueprint and being able to find good information. That's one of the reasons I wanted for you guys to meet Sifu. Sifu, what kind of things do you teach here at the school?
I teach Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, CSW, JKD, Kali Silat. Or should I say Mafilindo Silat. Savat, boxing, pretty much everything that you do very much.
All right. So, and it's a great source of information if you're in the Virginia Beach area. All right, guys, if you like what you've been watching, you want to see more, you can see the next video on the Combat Blueprint right up here. Also, if you have a question, give us a comment in the comment section and let us know what you'd like to see next.